Hello, welcome to
Hello.
Hello.
our webinar, Drive People to Your Web Series. We have a great panel today, and we're going to talk about web series and audience building and audience engagement. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves and tell us who they are and what they do. So, Carrie, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Carrie Cutforth. I'm a producer. I produce fun stuff across multiple platforms, live events, TV, film, web series. There's very few kind of media genres that I have not produced. I was the executive director and a co-founder of the Independent Web Series Creators of Canada and co-produced TO WebFest, which was the Toronto Web Series Festival. Currently, I'm working with Luminato Festival as their interactive marketing coordinator, and we're launching a huge show tomorrow that I'm, moonlighting with this webinar and missing part of the big activities of work I need to be doing at the moment. And also, I am the creator of Spy Horrors, which is a very campy, silly transmedia project in which the spy horrors use their weaponized sexuality to corrupt American family values during the Reagan era. So that's me in a heartbeat.
Excellent. Christian, can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Yeah, I'm Christian Aviel. I'm a producer, director, editor. I've shot 7 feature film and 2 web series, 3 web series actually. And right now I'm working on created and producing Heroes of the North, which is a live-action transmedia series about Canadian superheroes.
Great. Robert, tell us who you are.
I'm Robert Pratton. I'm the CEO of Transmedia, and we're the company that creates Conducttr, which is audience engagement software.
Great. And now Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Michelle Scott of Wildfire Effect Media, and what we basically specialize is in social media and engagement campaigns, more specifically to web series, but basically anyone who has a story or who's willing to take their marketing into a story is my super fan. I love them. So.
That's great. Thank you very much for being here, for being part of this webinar. And I'd just like to say to the audience that remember you can ask questions on Twitter using the hashtag #GetFans, and please leave your comments or ask any questions you have. And so I'm going to start with the basics, the beginning. How do you create your audience? Where do you start? I mean, what's the experience of starting creating the audience? Carrie, can you tell us about your experience?
I think, first of all, it's important to understand that we're not, audiences already exist. They don't come up out of thin air. They are there out in the, at the sphere, and they're hungry for content, and they're watching other things, and they're doing other things, right? So it's not that we're necessarily creating them for our show. We're finding them, right? And so having that mindset and understanding that, we're creating content that people want to see. We can start, navigating partnerships, trying to find people that we can leverage their audiences with, find out where these communities exist, talk to them, get to know them. And I really think that starts with, from the idea phase. That once you have an idea, that's when you should start doing the legwork of figuring out where these people are and how you're going to market to them and what kind of cross promotions you can have with people who have access to those audiences.
Okay, so it's finding where they are and building a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Christian, what do you think? Where did you start when you started doing the web series?
When I started with the web series, we did everything wrong in the sense that we didn't really plan for an audience. We had a plan because we decided to do something about superheroes. We started in 2009. It was already in the media with Iron Man and everything. So we had a plan to kind of ride that wave of marketing, but really, we didn't really think about the audience at the moment. We knew there was one, but we didn't really implement it. We kind of fell on our audience by accident by creating a Facebook page and getting everybody to join and start asking questions and then things like that. It's kind of an accident, but we learned a lot from there. But basically what Carrie said is basically what you should do is research before, as soon as you have an idea, research where these people hang out, where they are, what they like, and then cater and build your concept around that.
That's right. So for you, it was more organic. It was like something that happened naturally.
Yeah.
Great. Stephanie, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think actually Carrie hit them bang on when it comes to actually finding audiences instead of building audiences. So maybe I'll just kind of tie into that concept and state that when you're building an audience, you actually have to understand your audience, which sometimes means a bit of experimentation, seeing what types of content is most interesting to them, and really, really highlighting that and featuring it when it works with what your story is talking about. But another thing I think it's really, really important is once you actually have an understanding of what your audience is versus someone else's audience, you need to nurture that. And you get to know them and let them know that you care about them and you're watching them, and you'll nurture them all the way through the story.
That's good. So it could be said that to build an audience is actually finding the audience as well. Not only creating it from nothing, but because the audience is there, so you have to get to it.
I think in the old days of the web with YouTube and everything, we really did. Most of us had this mindset: build it and people will come, right? And we've learned that's not the case. That you really have to dig for them. But you never know. Like as Christian said, sometimes you do something organic and it takes off, and it just completely surprises you. But just getting back to what Stephanie was saying about, nurturing the audience. So you have the audience that you want to build and bring on board, but you really want to work with people who have access to those audiences, like key influencers, people who understand them, and you're selling yourself not just to that audience, but to those people to gain access, right? So Illuminato Festival does a really good. We have a lot of partnerships. So one of our best partnerships is with the New York Times for this series called Times Talks. And having that partnership means, everybody benefits. The New York Times benefits, Illuminato Festival benefits, and we're drawing upon the names of all the people who are speaking at these events, who are big names like David Byrne in the past and so forth. So whenever you can look at not just the audiences, but the partnerships and the networks you can create, that will really sustain it.
Okay,
I mean,
good. So,
I was just going to say something on that point about reaching out to influencers and people with big audiences that already they already have that in their network. I think if you're not careful, there's a problem when you just start out. You've got your first web series. You don't why should they pay attention to you? And you're like another person trying to approach these people that have got tons of fans to ask them to do you a favor. And I think if you look at successes like Coney and Susan Boyle and all these, and the Gangnam Style, they start with a hardcore of fans. They don't just produce their video and then go straight to an influencer and say, can you do me a favor and share this with everyone? They build up a grassroots core, and then actually the influencer, if they want to look relevant, for doing, because if they're not noticing this sort of groundswell of people actually kind of supporting your work, then they're kind of irrelevant. Then why are they so influential in the first place? And then I think you'll find that they approach you, and that's often what's happened there. So I think what Carey's saying is totally spot on, to really blow it out of the water. But to get to that stage, I think you have to mine deep, and I think that takes quite some time actually to really. And I mean that's the advantage of a web series, that you get that iteration, that you can go out with some content. And we've not even got onto Transmedia yet, but that you can go out with something and see if it has legs, see if people, if it resonates with people, and then know whether to do more or give up and start a different idea.
I don't think, I just want to touch upon what Robert just said, and it can't be stressed enough. Don't start approaching people until you have a value exchange to offer them, right? Don't reach here when you don't have any, something of value that they're going to gain out of it.
Okay, so build valuable content and start testing it, and also building partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And those partnerships, just to tag on to that, they can be starting with your own crew and your cast, your mother, your father, your friends. All of them have networks that can point you in the right direction. So when you're just starting, don't overlook them. They are extremely important.
My mother's network is the Worthing Bowls Club. I don't think they watch the internet, anything on the internet. But it's a good point.
Yeah, something to be aware of. So, what would you say is the best moment to start building your audience and start investigating? And when to start? When you have the idea, when you start producing the idea? What do you think, Christian, about this?
I think as soon as you have a concept that you're convinced you're going to go ahead with the project, you should start, because it takes so long to get the momentum going. It's better to, if there's already people out there interested, you can get them like on the ground floor, and eventually these people, if they're really into it, they become evangelists also for your project. They will talk to everybody about it, and they can't wait till it happens. So that helps a lot, I think. So as soon as you can, as fast as you can, as the minute you're committed to do a project, I think you should start creating awareness and building slowly the audience that way.
Do you agree with that, Stephanie?
I'd say absolutely. As soon as you have a story, and it has to be a full thought, not just an idea that you're pushing out there, because that's going to take a lot of your time away. And start with questions. Like, go to the forums, go to the Facebook pages, the groups, the organizations, all of them, and just start asking questions of the community. You're going to get a real feel for if it is going to be a potential hit or at least a possibility.
Good. Carrie, has your experience been like that as well?
Yeah, and I think one thing that shouldn't be overlooked is that it does establish IP, right? You know, it used to be when you, and for those who are unfamiliar with the term, intellectual property, which is a horrible legal term for creative content, but it used to be authors would send, these ridiculous ideas of establishing their copyright, like mailing themselves a letter. I mean, if I become a person who comes up with the idea of werewolf kittens, nobody steal it because I just said it right now, and I start producing werewolf kittens through Tumblr and all these feeds, I'm going to get to be known as the person who made werewolf kittens. There's not going to be any arguments, and I've already established that. So one of the projects that we had was I was working with Tom Littleholm, who worked with on Conspiracy for Good, ARG, and Jim Martin. And we created this story world called The Crowdfunding, which was, a multiverse, mind-bending thing, in which, we had a girl who, could cross over multiple platforms, and we had various versions of the girl. We had, the Stepford wife version of Emma, the junkie version of Emma. Stop me if this sounds familiar. And so we started, launching this content on Wattpad, and we have a novel on Wattpad, and we were looking for TV, and then Orphan Black came out, right? And it was so similar. We have to put it aside, right? But in time, we did all that work, and we established that we were, putting that out forth before Orphan Black came out. It was not that we ripped each other off. It was a global brain. Orphan Black was a 10-year history of trying to be developed. But now we've established that we were not just riffing off of them, and we still can preserve that franchise for a later time.
So just put the ideas out there. And don't be sure.
I mean, I think as well, with the transmedia storytelling approach, there's an opportunity to put stuff out there before you actually spend a lot of money on shooting your first web series, and to actually see in a much cheaper, lower risk way. I mean, like concept art and this type of thing, and the stuff that Carey's been doing with a Spy Horse, I think is really good, because I'm already excited, and you've not shot anything yet as far as I know. So I think that type of approach is really good.
Yeah, and with the Crowdfunding, with the novel on Wattpad, I mean, it's very cheap to write a chapter as opposed to hire an entire crew. And now we have over 1 million reads on Wattpad. So and that's, I just looked last night, we had over 11,000 subscribers. So that is an audience that I can now reach to, even with other projects. So I think it's really important to just start building. You never know how these things are going to accumulate. When you're doing it, it feels like it's not moving at all, and then one day you look at like, oh my God, 11,000 subscribers. How did that happen?
Yeah, so take advantage of the tools that are there and Transmedia to start building and start sharing content without having to spend a lot of money. But I want to ask a question about crowdfunding. What do you think about crowdfunding to build your audience? Have you done it? What's your experience about that? What are your thoughts about that? Christian, can you?
Yeah, I've done it, but I believe, I mean, if you depend on how much money you're trying to raise or whatever, but to do it well, I think you already need an established audience to have a decent result, because otherwise you're just grasping at straws. It's really hard to get a momentum going. Even if your family pitch in and everything, you're never going to make it go. I think it's a good, somewhat good solution, but it's not the necessarily the best way to build an audience. I think you already need the audience first before you actually go down that route.
I mean, something I would add there as well is I know a couple of people who ran crowdfunding campaigns, and they met their target and everything, and they thought, oh, I've got this audience now that I can go back to, and actually that audience wasn't that interested. I mean, not in terms of like becoming an audience. They were very happy to support the project and see someone fulfill their dream or whatever, but then that was the extent of their involvement. They didn't then want to get involved in advocating for the project or anything like that. So I think that I don't know if that was your experience, Christian, as well, but I think that you have to be careful there, because I often see people saying, oh, run the crowdfunding campaign, build an audience, but I think that that audience is an audience that likes to spend their money, not necessarily an audience that likes to advocate. They might not have that time.
Exactly. No, in our case, it was a mix of different kinds of people. Part of it was our audience. Part was just people who wanted to help, like you just pointed out. Part was people who just bump into it, and they wanted a specific product, but they didn't necessarily care about the rest. So it's so that's why I think before you go in, you need to have an audience. I don't think it's a good audience building tool. I think you already need to have the audience first. Personally, that's my experience.
That's good advice, I think.
Yeah, really good.
So, Stephanie, do you want to weigh in, or could I jump in there?
Yes, of course, please.
So, you can check my website at carriecutforth.com. I have a bunch of articles there about crowdfunding, why you should do it and why you shouldn't. Being in the web series community in Toronto, I mean, sometimes you see these crowdfunding campaigns, and it's like everybody is pimping to each other in the industry. And it's like, people who are working in the industry have no money, and if they have money, they're going to use it on their own project. And sometimes you would see somebody would put $50, and then another time somebody would put $50, and I sometimes would think it was the same $50 circulating. So, doing a crowdfunding campaign is as much work, if not more, than actually doing a production. So, really think about it before you get into it. Really strategize and be very modest with your expectations based on your network.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put my link back up there.
So, I wanted to ask you another thing. Now that you're saying that you should start building the audience and start sharing the content and all of that, so would you recommend having like a website first and then start going to production, or what would that be? What would that process be? So, Stephanie, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm really, really strong on the belief that you need to own the place that you're going to put your content out. So even if you are taking advantage of all the social media that exists there, you need to have a place where your fans can land, and in most cases that is going to be a website. They're really, really easy. They integrate really well in all the other places that you're talking about the content. But I do believe, especially with the changing tides of social media, if you want to be able to control the direction of where things are going to go, you're going to have to control the place, and that is a website. So that's my thought.
Also, if somebody's really interested in your project, the best way where you can provide as much information as possible about your project, it's on your website. I mean, you can put as many pages as you want on Facebook, but eventually it goes down the timeline, nobody sees it, same with Twitter. So, I mean, like social media is a good bullhorn, basically, but it's not the place where you want something in depth about the project. So you need your website, you need to own your content as well, and where it's located.
I think it's really important to, like, my brain thinks of the website first. Like, that is the way I start developing the pitch in my mind, because it has the entire frame, who I am, I have to articulate, what the idea is, what are the images, right? So that's how the project unfolds in my brain. One of the most important things about a website, well, two things. One, get people to subscribe with an email address. Once you have an email address, you have a direct connection. And two, then you are watching impressions, right? I'm just fortunate that I had this, great idea for this project called spywars.com, and I have so much traffic based on a Google keyword, which I have to guess why people are searching.
Spy.
But then when you can develop you can watch your analytics and see where they're going, that's when you can start building partnerships with brands and so forth and say, this is the traffic to my website. So get that data early and start working on it.
I mean, I think this, actually, while I'm talking about websites, I can also answer someone else's question about introducing the fans to Transmedia. But first, I'll do the website. I was talking to somebody today that has got millions, literally millions of people on Facebook, and the problem is that Facebook changed its algorithm, and now they can't reach any of them. At least not without a paid ad or something. So they are like completely screwed because they got no way to actually activate the fans. So it's nice, and you could imagine that they spent all this effort to build a big day, like they're sitting there going, whoa, look at all those Facebook fans, and they can't actually reach them. And I had this isn't like an isolated case. So what Carey said about building your own database of your audience is really important, and I think email and text messaging, but email for sure is still a primary way that you can get directly to someone when you want to invite them to spend their money or let them know that a new episode's coming out, and so on. And just to touch on that, the question that we had on Twitter about how do I introduce my fans to sort of Transmedia? Well, I think you don't need to really use the word Transmedia. I mean, people are familiar with the sort of web series. They're familiar with They're familiar with lots of things, and I think you just pitch them those individual experiences. This is going to be an exciting experience. It's going to play out over a couple of weeks, and you're going to get phone calls and emails. And what we want you to do is solve a puzzle or something. Solve the mystery, and then you don't need to explain that this is Transmedia, for example, or like with Kerry's example with the book. You don't have to explain what a book is. It's just part of that to take you back to the website. Okay. Every piece of media should be leading somewhere else so that you don't get any dead ends. So everything you come in contact with, once you've enjoyed that, it takes you on to another piece. You're forever. It's a bit like the casino. Like you can never find the exit door, and that's how it should be with your content.
I'm stealing that. That's brilliant.
Can I tie into just a little concept on that? So, Robert, I love the way that you're talking about the experience of actually bringing your fans in and such, because interesting enough, when you look into like fan psychology and neurology that exists, one of the most powerful marketing tools that you have is your ability to bring your fans into an experience, because once someone has experienced something, they're going to remember it and they're going to tell other people about it. So that goes into a traditional side of marketing that has nothing to do with web series, but web series has a specific ability to tap into, which I find interesting.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
I just want to add about not using transmedia. I mean, there's huge the term transmedia. There's huge fights over this, and they go by geolocation and war. There have been fights over the word transmedia. In Canada, it's much more acceptable because our funding is somewhat geared towards it. But if you ask the average person on the street, they don't understand what transmedia is. However, I would have to say big props to, the team of Lizzie Bennett Diaries, in which that fandom does use the word transmedia and understands it. So if you're doing, something that wants to steal Bernie Sue's audience, as large as it is, you can tag things on Tumblr with the word transmedia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using the word transmedia, but you have to know your audience. Are they going to understand it? So
exactly.
It's really about adapting to their behaviours, not trying to swing them around and motivate them to do something different. I think that's the key.
And never pitch the audience that, you know, what you're presenting them, the experience or the platform or whatever media, and pitching that as being more important than the story. Like, I don't want to see a multi-platform experience. You've never, and no, start with the story. That's what we need, what people gravitate to.
I mean, in this conversation, Christian must be the king of transmedia, because Christian, with your website, you've got like comic books, like underwear, figurines. You've got all kinds of stuff there for sale.
Yeah, we also design. We also design websites, like in-universe websites for each for the characters or the physical locations that exist in the show and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's part of it. Yeah, yeah.
So I would say that you are educating your audience into what transmedia is, right? It's like, it doesn't matter if they don't know. You just...
No, it doesn't matter. Like, we do have a section on the website where we explain what it is, transmedia, but I think, you know, there's a visitor once in a while there, but it's not like really important or essential for anybody to enjoy what we're doing.
Exactly. You just enjoy it. You don't need to know it's transmedia. It's called transmedia.
In the end, it's content. Transmedia could just be like put down into the big umbrella of content, and that's what you're doing. Well, connected content.
Yeah.
Experiential. Sure it is. Yeah.
I think we're going to head into a definitions debate now.
No, we're going to steer way clear of that.
So let me ask you something. We've been talking about building the audience, so, and the use of transmedia to do that. But how do you keep them engaged? Once you have them, how do you keep them entertained and interested in your story using all of these tools? And how do you avoid being invasive, or how do you know when to stop and this balance? So I'm gonna ask Carrie.
I think you want to be invasive, but the creator of Spy Wars. There's a delicate line of spamming, and there's a delicate of when you're spamming people, and there's a delicate line of when you are also being too quiet, right? And I think, it's one of these things. Do I have the audience? Like, I have a lot of people who will come to me and say, well, I have 1 million YouTube videos. I have an audience. No, you have 1 million views.
That's good.
With that audience. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you have hooks on every piece of media that you can, that brings people back to the central source that you can connect them with, right? So if it's a YouTube video, make sure you have links, and make sure, you can have a 3-year-old YouTube video and you can be updating the description all the time, doing annotations on videos, reminding people you're there. Sometimes you don't have to constantly be making new content, but just keeping the plate spinning and letting people remember, like how fantastic this was.
What we do, I think transmedia is also a good tool to do that, because you have to create so much content anyway. Like when we start creating the in-universe websites, for example, it's another reason for people to come and visit and explore more of the story. But the other advantage of all that is also that keeps you a fresh load of content every other time. Even if the story is finished, even if your web series is finished, you can still develop the storyline in other directions and keep the project alive constantly. So
keeping it alive.
Yeah.
Good. Stephanie, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously in the world of fan engagement and fans and audiences, that's really where I like to live, and I like to play, and I like to learn. So yes, absolutely. I think for me the most important thing is actually starting the entire marketing concept, because you've got your story concept and you've got your marketing concept, but the marketing one has to be focused in fans. And there is a belief system that a fan is a fan is a fan is a fan is a fan. It's not true. You've got individuals that want to interact with your story in many, many different ways. You have to have something out there for the ones that are in the passive realm. You have to have ones that like to have a little bit of interaction, and you want to have something for the super fans that are kind of the very small percentage of your fan base. And over time, you're going to find out that you have maybe 80% in one category versus another, or perhaps you just want, as a creator, to play in one category versus another and only concentrate on fans in that area. So there is a real importance in understanding the different types of campaigns you can create at different fan levels, and just understand that your fans want to interact. It's just a matter of finding the way that they are most comfortable doing it. And that's where you should start.
And then I would go to say on top of that you know, how you choose what kind of interaction you want to have with your fans also might go back to your overall goals for the entire property. Are you just getting fans for fans' sakes? Are you trying to monetize them? Like, what is the end goal here? So if you're thinking in terms of those fans, of the super fan and the more passive and so forth, I mean, everybody, you know, super fans are the ones that spend money. So, you know, sometimes it's okay to have less of an audience that is more supportive, right? But it depends on what your goals are for this project. And you should have that clearly in your mind, knowing it can change.
So maybe it's a good point for me to sort of say a few words, because so we've had some questions come in about, you know, what sort of tools are people using, and how do people measure the engagement and this type of thing, or measure the effects of reach and so on. So obviously this is run by Conducttr, and Conducttr is a great tool you should all be using, because it encourages you to think about audience engagement when you're developing your creative, so that you don't have like an amazing story idea that you think, okay, this is done now. Where's Stephanie? Who can I give this to help find me some fans with it? You should be thinking about the fans. And then what you can do in the story world, maybe you can create different factions, different hierarchies that could equate to different interest groups within your fan base. And as people start interacting, if they're doing it through Conducttr, you can start to put them into different groups. So in Conducttr, you'll have, these are my like super fans. These are the ones who are really active. And I know that because every time they interact on my Facebook page or on Twitter or any email that I send out, they're clicking the links, they're doing stuff. They're building experience points inside Conducttr. So we know that. And then when it comes time to actually say like do a special offer or do a special promotion, you can target it just at those special fans that you know are going to appreciate that, and you might look at the ratio of super fans to everyone else. And if it's very flat, if you don't have like a group of super fans and it's all very flat, you're probably not working hard enough, because you're not giving enough for, you know, the people that really love that story world. They're probably the ones that are saying, when's the next episode coming out, or, you know, when can we you know, do such and such, you know, when's this character actually going to make amends with that. You know, your fans will really start digging into this, and I think you want to identify those and try to give them special rewards so they feel like a special fan.
So would you say that you want to identify different kinds of fans and then build an different interactive experiences for it? Yeah,
different people enjoy different things. So some people like exploring, some people like making choices, some people like, you know, creating their own content and contributing to the world, and some people just like to sit back and enjoy it when it comes out, and that's totally fine. But what's really good for you to do as a creator is understand how many you've got in those camps, and whether some are underserved, or whether you're doing too much in a particular area that you keep asking people to generate content when actually that's not really what your audience is into. They're more interested in a sort of a gaming mechanic, for example. So it keeps coming back to understanding your audience, and it's something that, like, if you look at the internet, it's given everybody a fantastic opportunity to go direct to a fan base, and with that opportunity comes a little bit of responsibility to find out about them and do the things that some of these bigger companies have been doing. You know, they're doing that data mining, and you know, they're not impervious. There's lots of big companies that have gone bust because they didn't understand their audience, and they spent a shed load on advertising and so on. So they reach a lot of people, and they have a momentary blip, and then whoop, everyone's gone, because they don't give a shit about what you're talking about. You just paid for exposure, and that was it. So, like, the rules of engagement apply to everybody, regardless of budget. And I think, obviously, if you use Conducttr, then you can really compete on a big scale with these guys at a fraction of the cost, obviously.
Robert, I just want to highlight, like, somebody just tweeted exactly about this, asking a question from GetFans. What kind of analytics or data do you collect to measure return on investment? And so I would say, you know, what Robert's describing is the kind of perfect for the kind of, you know, storytelling aspects that you want to know of how are you performing. I mean, you know, Google Analytics and a lot of these analytics, Twitter Analytics, they hold, I mean, they give you a little bit of data, but they're holding most of the cards to themselves. So you just see this kind of veneer. So being able to have access to something like Conducttr, where you can see really, you know, understand how your audience is engaged with your story world, is amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to just tie into it. Maybe this isn't necessarily a raw Conducttr kind of thing, but it's very, very, very hard to data mine on a single basis. If you can get a software program that will put things into different camps so that you can understand quicker and more in real time, and you can act quickly towards listings, it's a very powerful thing to have.
Yeah. And in terms of, like, return on investment, I mean, this is the thing. You can have return on investment in that it gives you warm, fuzzy feels. In social media, often return on investment means, you know, Facebook likes and stuff like that. That's not a return on investment. How many, you know, how much of an audience you have? A return on investment is you made more money than you spent creating this, right? And that's something that sometimes gets lost when we talk about social media return on investment. So it goes back to the basic questions you should always be asking. What am I doing this? Why am I doing this for? What are my goals? And am I succeeding them? And then you set up the analytics that way. If it's to make money, then you have a clear, I need to be making money. If it is for social good, which a lot of transmedia and story, you know, telling properties does, you can create clear, defined goals. But anytime when you're talking about analytics or return on investment or audience or anything, it always goes back to what are your goals? What am I trying to accomplish? And how am I going to do that? Good.
So, how do you feel about paying for advertisement? Now that we're talking about that, have you tried it in any of your projects, and how has it worked? Carrie, you can take the word, and then we'll ask you.
You know, the problem with a kind of question like that is that you're getting into proprietary information that I'm not able to divulge. On a personal project level, I always did everything the grassroots way with, you know, limited success and some success. For me, a part of the advertising was, you know, partnering with platforms such as Wattpad and being able to do that kind of thing where, you know, it wasn't money spent, but it was sweat equity. It was the time I invested. But you know, I've been changed around to see how effective bot advertisement is in the various spheres I've been working, and you know, the types of bot advertising is much different than it used to be.
Christian, have you had any experience with that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I've done a bit. It can be really, really effective or absolutely disastrous. You really need, it's not as easy. Like, I know Facebook has changed a bit. For example, it's mostly Facebook I've used. They changed their algorithm. They made it a bit easier now, but your message has to be really, really well targeted. It's the same thing as Carrie was talking earlier. You have a goal, you have to be really clear of who it is targeted and why, and what you're trying to achieve with it. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of money and get no returns. But I've had great success with it and total failures as well. So it's kind of hit and miss for me. Yeah.
I kind of feel like advertising has its place if you already have that core base. Like if you already know that there's an audience for what you're doing, and you feel like I need to sort of leverage this and get a little bit further, and then you're looking at like a combined strategy of your sort of your content, your sort of social media, and some paid advertising, then that's good. But I've seen too many people spend a shed load of money on advertising only to find out that nobody likes what they're doing. And you could find out that nobody likes what you're doing for nothing. But that's the truth. So you kind of need to do that first. Like, what you shouldn't do, what you shouldn't do is like show a few people that go, that's rubbish, and you go, no, you're probably not in my audience. And then you show another few people that go, nah, it's not good. Go, sorry, I'm going to spend a load of money on advertising, and there must be somebody out there who likes it. That's not the approach.
Yeah. I think it's important also to make a demarcation between money you spend on advertising, which is giving like a platform or a billboard or something money for a pre-made, print ad or whatever, compared to having a solid marketing team. Definitely spend your time and energy in the marketing and having people who are really savvy, or even if you're self-savvy, to learn these skills. That is a wise investment for sure.
Yeah, I think I'll tie into the fact I've had some success and some failures when it comes to clients going into the paid realms. And most of the time, it's because when they were doing their original targeting, they put their money out too fast and went too broad instead of saying, well, I know that I need to focus on individuals in this particular city with this message because I know that's going to hit really, really well. So then they'll market very specifically to that area, and then they'll reach. In a lot of cases, I think when it comes to traditional marketing like paid systems, can you reach that audience on your own? Maybe, maybe not. If the answer is not, then you might want to consider ways that you can get to them through paid advertising.
But I agree, the more targeted, the better. It seems to yield a better result, which is, it's kind of, it's the advantage now with the internet, because you can actually really granularly figure out who you're talking to or who you're trying to reach, whereas before the other form of advertising are more wide and broad.
There's a place.
I think the advertising is quite a sort of a blunt tool, and if you put aside some money, I think you're better off spending that on getting some good advice from someone like Stefan, who can work with you with your project and is going to break it down. And it's like when you write a movie script. When you write a movie script, it's good to have somebody else read it, and they can go through and they can say this doesn't work in this scene, or this character is not fitting in, or whatever, because you're so close to it. And it's good to have somebody look at like a marketing strategy for you and say, and then to spend money on content, like I call it sacrificial content. It's the stuff you're going to give away for free because it's going to resonate with people and it's going to bring them back to some sort of hub somewhere where later, even if not immediately, you're going to earn revenue from them. I think that money is a smart money rather than the dumb money that you just chuck away on advertising.
And I think, two things. One, going back to what Robert said about being very targeted, and I think everybody has said this, it's like I see too often where everybody wants to be everywhere at once, and it's like they're throwing arrows into the air and letting them fall wherever they go. And you have to be really like, a bowman with an arrow, setting up your targets and going, right? Like that's the way you want to be with your marketing. And having somebody who is really savvy at understanding this can really help you out. The other thing I was going to say was, what Robert was saying about somebody looking down at your film. When it comes to transmedia storytelling, it's often too much the case that with marketing, we always see it as a separate entity to the property, right? And I think what Stephanie and I both do when we consult with people is we show how it is like enveloped around the property and that it's integral. So, going back to Brittany Sue and the Lizzie Bennett diaries, I mean, the big difference that they did was the transmedia producers sat in the room with the scripts as they were being written and were able to find the hooks through there. They didn't come to it after the fact given a script and say, now go market this. Right, and so especially at the indie level, we have the ability to really think about this through the process, as opposed to seeing the process of production being separate to the marketing process.
Yeah. If you think about all the creators out there and script breakdowns, I mean, you've got your location breakdown, you've got your prop breakdown, you've got your set breakdown. You should be having a marketing and transmedia breakdown as well. These days, especially, and web series is phenomenal opportunity out there for finding somebody who loves what it is you're producing.
Yeah, I think quite often when I meet content creators, they're kind of looking for that Cinderella story where they're gonna do something and someone's gonna pluck them from obscurity and give them a ton of cash. But I think you should, like, that should be a plan B, and your plan A should be to be in this for the long term and think, strategically about how you're gonna do this without being Cinderella and plucked. So that's where the plan comes in.
I keep going back to what you said, Carrie, about Bernie Sue, because it's funny. He is actually going to be speaking at the Vancouver Web Fest in just a couple of days from now. And he did this micro interview where he talked about that entire concept of goal setting. And it's okay if your web series is supposed to only showcase all the great things that you do in the world so you get the next job and the money the next time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just building audiences that you can leverage into the next one. It's just interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important, like, one of the things that Bernie and his team do really clever is, I mean, they have this whole empire, as does Christian. It's this empire that there's always these rollouts happening. There's always something going on and building. And not all of us are going to be there now. Not all of us are going to be at that level, when we start out. So sometimes it's okay to go quiet for a little while, and and don't become discouraged and disheartened, because it's a lot to produce the stuff all the time exhaustively, especially when you're first taking out. So we're talking about some really people who've been in the game for a while and took a long time to get where they were. So it goes back to what Robert's saying. It's like it's not an overnight thing.
No, exactly.
Another option, if you instead of just going quiet, is what we do when we have more downtime. We just kind of curate content that's related to what we do, or in the interest that we know, like, our fans will like. That's something we use to feed, like, social media, sometimes even the blog or whatever, because it helps keep you in their mind as well.
Yeah.
So, without having to produce content necessarily.
He never has any downtime. I've never seen him have any time.
So, yeah, Robert, you wanted to say something?
Well, I think Christian hit on something there, and that is, like he said, if I don't have any content of my own, then I'm introducing my fan base to content that is relevant to them. And so that reminds me of the idea that actually you're providing a service for the fans. Like, you're helping fans to connect to each other, and I think that's important sort of thing to have in mind when you're creating your web series. That you're not just creating a web series, you're creating a service that is something that's living and breathing, that lives beyond just that few minutes that it's on YouTube or wherever it might be. So I think that's really good.
It becomes a community. I mean, a lot of our fans, they met each other when we go to events and stuff. A lot of them have become friends. They become friends of us, but they also become friends with each other. So it becomes a community at some point, and it becomes like a rallying point for people who like the same type of stuff. And they all have similar interests in that respect, and that way you can actually amplify your offering. Basically, if you don't have all the resource, or you're just starting out, it's also a good way to test the waters for your show or your series, if you want, to see how many people react to the curated content that already exists, that doesn't cost you anything. It helps you figure out what people like and don't like, or if it's a good direction. It helps you validate your idea.
That's really good.
That's
a great idea.
The other thing is, Christian, you have a lot of like face-to-face interaction with fans through all the expos you guys visit, right?
Yeah. I think that's very important as well. As much as because when you when you know somebody, it's easier to relate to him. It's easier to connect with them, right? It's easy to be anonymous on the internet, and it eventually just becomes another project or just another thing. But when they actually know you, they meet you, they talk to you, you become somebody. They have a picture in mind of you, and it's not just the show. It's also people behind it. And I think it helps the connection a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Events, if you can get in front of your audience, wonderful way of engaging them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I wanted to ask next, because we have different ways of connecting to the community that you build. We have social media, different platforms, and you have live events. So how do you decide, and how do you connect with this audience? I mean, how do you know which platforms to choose, and if to do live events or not? Would you recommend always doing them or not? What are your thoughts on that, Stephanie?
Well, you need to know where your fans are coming from. So that's where you start with the analytics. Are they all mostly featured within one city? If so, you're going to have a really great opportunity to bring them together to talk about what they love about the story itself. If they're all over the world, that's not necessarily as much of an option. And you might want to use some sort of event tool that exists out there where you can have an online experience and an online community that happens. So lots of different event planners have created many interesting types of events. I'm a huge fan of the alternate reality game world because I think that's extremely engaging for someone who loves the story. Question and answers that exist out there about what the cast and crew were going through are nice and simple ways of kind of getting engagement in online or in universal space as well. Event doesn't have to be in person. It can be something people look forward to.
For me, riffing off of, where do the fans exist? Tim Kring, the creator of Heroes, he says fish where the fish are, right? But at the same time, I think it's not just a matter of, building yourself on that platform. As much as you can, partner with platforms and have something to offer them, like talk to, you got to be at a certain level, but you got to work towards that certain level of knowing people in the industry, so you could say, hey, we want to do a Reddit AMA or whatever you call it. And make friends with people who work on Twitter or Indiegogo or whatever, and get to know them, and try to get featured.
Do you have an opinion on that, Christian?
Well, of course, the more connections you can make anywhere, not just with your fan, but everybody in relation to whatever you're doing or whatever your idea or concept is always good. I mean, that's the only way you can grow. I agree with Stephanie, you can't always necessarily attend in person or whatever, but if you can, if there's any opportunity to connect personally with your fan, I mean, I would recommend you do it. If it's possible. If it's not, it's not. It's fine. But I think any means that we have to connect is a good mean. But at the same time, it's easy to drown in that. Like a lot of people say, how many social media sites should I be on? And some people are trying to be everywhere. There's this philosophy to be everywhere, and I don't believe in that. I think you should have you pick 2 or 3 good social media sites that you're comfortable with, and you use those. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself nuts.
I mean, look at all the people who drove into Google Plus, and now with the announcement today. I still do people plugging away on it long after we said, I don't think you're going to get traction for that. So there's a lot of questions on Twitter, and I just want to answer one really quickly about integrating brands. So I've worked on projects that have done this. Talent Hounds was a Transmedia, not quite web series, but with a YouTube channel with a lot of dog tricks. And the producer behind that, Susan Nation, came from a marketing background. She worked with Pepsi and big giant companies. And so, she had a really brilliant way of getting brands on board and integrating them. I think one of the things you need to be cautioned, and it goes back to relationships, it goes back to the same key things. What am I offering the brands? Brands don't buy ideas, they're looking for audience eyeballs, right? And so you need to be able to, show that you can provide them. But, like YouTube is changing its rules around branded content, right? So, I mean, always remember things change on a dime. But if you want to hear a really good talk about it, TO Webfest last year had a panel with Bernie Sue and Dominic Roche and all of the big people who've really cracked this nut. And it is on an app called Instar Radio that's now changed to RAUW. I'll write it right here. And you can get that podcast and listen to it. It's amazing.
I think that's the thing with a bit like it's interesting about. Of course, everyone wants more audience, like including the brands, but there's something you can also offer the brands, and that is credibility or repositioning. I mean, if you look at the Inside experience that was, it was run by Intel, but it was paid for by Toshiba. Toshiba was seen as like the dad's brand, so like younger people were not even considering a Toshiba laptop, and so they ran this web series called the Inside Experience, and that shifted the dial like considerably, because it was about like a horror. It was appealing to a younger horror type audience, and Toshiba actually saw an uplift in sales. And I think when you're starting out with a web series, you can't go to a brand if it's your first web series and you've got no audience to say, I can bring you loads of audience. What you're looking for is them to bring you audience, but what you can do is offer them credibility. You can offer them content that's appealing to their things, and it comes back to this idea that we touched on at the start of the webinar, and that is that you've got to own your fan base. It's no good if they only exist on Facebook or if they only exist on Twitter, because you can't activate them when you need to. So this is why you want to bring them back to a website or bring them back to a web app or something where you can really control the environment, control when you offer them things from the brand or whatever it might be. So I think that's key. If you're going to involve brands, that should be a key part of your strategy.
And to tie into that, also understanding that audience that you own as well, because if they're just emails and you have never interacted with them, you've never called out to them on Twitter, you've never gotten to know who they are as individuals or why they care, then it's just like blanketing again. So better blanketing, but yeah.
That's true.
Christian, you've got sponsorship, haven't you? How did you find your sponsors?
Well, we started looking at sponsors more when we had a bigger audience. Obviously, we tried in the early days, but it didn't work at all. So once we had an audience more established, it was easier to get sponsors. We just approach them, show them what we're doing, explain what we needed, and they agreed or they don't. We did some branded entertainment as well, branded content inside the shows, and then the way we found it worked best is when we actually able to integrate the brand inside the storyline, so it doesn't feel like an advertisement. Because I've seen some people try to do that, and it's more like you really feel like it's heavy-handed. So if it's integrated inside the storyline, and we find a way to make it fit, it works better. I found for the viewers. I mean, the brand doesn't necessarily like it because they really want their message more than. So that's why we haven't done a lot of it, because it's really hard to reach an agreement that makes sense for us and for them, because in regards to their goals versus ours.
And sometimes, a key is getting first in sponsor, right? So a workaround for that is like, how do I get, the chicken and the egg? In film and TV, we need locations. Sometimes we could get people to sponsor those locations. They don't even think of it sponsoring. They're like, hey, yeah, use our empty parking lot, right? But you could put L's parking lot sponsored our shoot on our website, and then people come to your website, and now you've got a first in sponsor, right? I mean, I would not go to L's parking lot. I mean, you want something with a little bit more traction, but then you're showing, hey, people invested in us in some capacity, and so you should too.
Exactly. In fact, Kerry hit on a good point there, that often the dull, uninspiring, undifferentiated brands are ones that are worth going after, because you can add a bit of glamour and some differentiation to them.
That's true.
Really good. So I have a final question that I want to do that I think it's interesting, but we'll then have to wrap up. There was one question that says, does multi-platform management split the audience or expand it? So I think it's interesting to answer that, because people might think like, if I have content around different platforms or using different platforms, my audience will be divided. So what are your thoughts about that? And then we'll wrap it up. Christian, what are your thoughts?
I don't think so. I mean, It does happen. Like, for example, we have fans that they'd rather just read the comics, don't really care about the shows, or some people just like the show, don't really read the comics. There is always a percentage of people who just focus on one piece of content. But overall, I find most people at least sample or try almost everything. They obviously they prefer certain aspects of it, but in some case, the super fans will look at everything you produce. So that's, I would say, it's about 20% of the audience, and there's another 20% that will just stick to one genre, one medium, and everything else is basically like it's like the law of average. And in the middle, you'll find people will sample a little bit of everything. So it's not necessarily wasted effort or wasted time. And the other aspect is that it helps you reach a broader audience than if you just focused on making a show, for example, because you have different elements that can bring people from all kinds of other areas. And that's been our experience. That's how we've been able to build our audience.
Exactly. So it allows you to expand it. Carrie, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to how you speak to audiences on different platforms, is how is the audience on that platform speaking? How are they behaving? Not just look too much at the platform itself, but how is this community? And the thing is the story elements, you'll be surprised. Like when you start following how people behave online, then you get really great ideas of how to really capture them. But just remember a few things, like millennials use online, they don't see a distinction between all of these. Like we think of a book, we think of a movie, we think of a film. They're much more fluid across platforms.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes we get too stressed over the platforms and not the key issues are people will follow things that they're strongly identify with, right? The characters, the story. I mean, they're not there they're there for convenience, but that's not why they follow people on that platform. It's because they're getting something else out of it. And define that instead of the best practices or techniques or plug in the holes like a lot of social media experts try to say.
Stephanie.
Well, I think the most important thing to note is that your fans already are divided. Their attention is divided. They are going to be interested in certain things and not interested in other things. So you can build your audience by giving them what they want, basically. And I also want to tie into what Carrie said there. Really interesting about the concept of getting out there and understanding that fan base. It is so key. I think that question actually has more to do with the creators wondering how they're going to divide their time, which is small compared to all the existing options that exist in creating content. I think that's really the heart of what it's saying. So listening to your audience is going to be the best way for you to decide how to divide up
your work
and your content into the right spaces.
So I think it's time to wrap it up. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to say a final thought, a final piece of wisdom that you want to share with our audience about web series, creating content, audience engagement, or anything about, an insight of your experience. And that's how we'll close the webinar. So, Carrie.
First of all, I want to make a plug for Illuminato Festival. You can go to illuminatofestival.com. Tomorrow we're announcing a huge, epic show. And there'll be some interesting things that come out of that in a digital sense later on. In terms of advice, for me it always goes to the cornerstones, and maybe we didn't touch upon this, but always ask yourself, what am I asking the audience to do, and is it reasonable, right? Sometimes, back in the old ARG days when a lot of us people were playing it, we would climb a hill to find a piece of story and decode it through a cipher and have to get it translated to German and English. And, recently with the Wattpad novel, I had written, a character speaks in Swedish, and all these fans were really upset, and I felt like back in my day, fans would dig more. So, sometimes let's make things a little easy for fans and not try to hide all of our content.
Good. Christian,
final
thought.
A final thought. Well, I think the key to everything is the content, right? So basically, do your research, figure out what you want to say and to whom, and I think that's the key to anything. Once you figure that out, everything kind of falls into place almost naturally. Even people are looking for monetization and everything. I think once you know who you're targeting and why and for what, it's fairly easy after that to make a plan and figure things out. I mean, of course, things will change on the road, but at least you know where you're going, so it's easier. Like, you know, when sometimes there's a pothole or whatever, you have to turn around, but at least you know where you're going. So.
Really good. Thank you. Robert, a final thought?
Well, final thought from me, Natalie, is that we are releasing this 21 must-do things if you want to build your audience. Do you like this package, Kerry? So in it,
I was supposed to respond. I loved it.
So I'm gonna tweet it out now, and everyone that signed up for the for notification of the webinar will be able to receive a copy as well. It's going to be on SlideShare, and it's an active document. So in there, the examples that you see, you can actually try out, and you can come over to Conducttr and build them as well. So it's a really good resource for anybody that's got a web series or a TV show or a movie.
Amazing. We'll share that with the audience. And Stephanie, your final thoughts?
I can't top that. I can't wait to get my hands on that document.
Come on, take it on and go.
But okay, if I have to put one of the 1,000 thoughts that are running through my mind right now, I guess stay to your strengths. And if we're talking about web series, we're talking about really engaging stories. So when you're thinking about your own marketing and how you're going to engage your fan bases and learn about them and build your audience, really, really remember that don't differentiate out of the fact that you already have an incredible story, and there's 1,000 ways that you can get people excited about that. So stick to your story.
Thank you very much.
Before we end,
yes,
I have got another final thought, but I completely forgot. I am teaching a course called Writing for Transmedia at Sheridan College starting this Saturday, and the deadlines to sign up are Thursday, so I will tweet out a link in a moment. But if you're really interested in this stuff, please join me on this epic journey with this course.
And I'm just going to state out there were a lot of questions that were unanswered on Twitter, and I know that all of us are probably going to go through them and start individually connecting with all of you and kind of getting those answers to you. So we are still together, and we're still going to work out those questions.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
For my launch, but I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll try to keep the conversation going and answer the questions that weren't answered, because you know, this webinar was for that. So we'll generate discussion on Twitter, which is great. So thank you so much for all your great insights and advice. And thank you for the audience who joined and everyone who participated. So it was great, I think. So see you at the next webinar.
Fantastic.
Thank
See
you,
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.